The eternal dance of light and dark illuminates the dualistic nature of reality and the magic that binds them. Welcome back to Moonstruck. I'm Ryan right here on Riot Radio, and today we're going to be talking about the dualistic nature of reality and some of the concepts associated with that. So, first, we're going to be talking about in the first section what is consciousness and kind of this immaterial line that divides darkness and light in our consciousness. And we're going to be talking about the different paths associated with this in terms of some of spiritual traditions, such as when they talk about the left and right hand path. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about some preconceived notions we have when we encounter these concepts in discussion. So, unfortunately, there's no Moonstruck sign today, but I thought we'd take a break from it for a week and, maybe pick it up again next week when everything's back into the regular flow of nature. So I feel like we're almost starting a new cycle here. So I wanted to kind of touch upon this topic because it's something that consciously and unconsciously affects us throughout our daily life, but most of the times we're not conscious of it because these concepts appear so mundane. Something as simple as the sun rising in the morning and the moon coming out at night, even if it's not illuminated or is illuminated. And that really represents different aspects of this cycle in which you have one side which is projected at certain angles and positions in which light illuminates through the night at certain times of the month, and you have the other aspect, the right hand path, in which the sun illuminates constantly and it's always there, and it doesn't go through these phases. So why really is that in terms of our consciousness and our physiology, and what does that represent? How does that affect us? So we've kind of talked about some of these concepts in past episodes. Actually, in the first episode where we talked about the nature of consciousness, declassified document by the CIA, where we talked about the nature of consciousness in terms of the energy fields that surround the body and such. And you have the two hemispheres of the brain, which represent two different aspects of our being, and they work together, and they're both necessary for this expression of the self. And the sun represents the direct aspect, in which is just pure energy and pure force being imprinted on reality. And the other aspect represents the intuitive aspect, which helps express what the human being fundamentally resonates with on a spiritual level. When we talk about these concepts, we normally think that they're very complex, but really they're not as complex as we really make them out to be. It's just that they have a lot of layers to peel back within them. So when we talk about these, we can really understand or seek to understand really the nature of reality that occurs around these celestial objects and what they represent within our being. So why is this important, really? Well, they represent aspects of the self, and it's really imperative that when we talk about self-development and expression, that we talk about how to understand ourselves and how to understand the mechanics that go on within our own body and physiology, such as water, the movement of water and the movement of the oceans being tied to the moon or the lunar cycles. This is a concept that has been known about for a long time. Human beings are 75% water, around that anyway. So it's only rational to assume that this does not just pertain to affecting natural bodies of water like seas and oceans, but it also affects us and how we interpret things in the world, right? And through these cycles or lunar cycles, we can really tap into deeper aspects of our own consciousness. When we talk about the left and right hand path, especially in magic, what it's referred to as in spirituality, we're really talking about these two energies, one associated with the natural flow of things in life, such as events taking place, mindfulness, being present in the time you are, such as shown on this diagram. And the other represents really reflection on what is internal or what is not manifest yet in reality, such as desires or what you want to happen in your future, things of that nature that are not necessarily directly here and now, but can manifest. And through your logical mechanisms inside you, you can really devise a way of operating yourself so you can achieve that which you want. But first, you have to have a mechanism that is capable of doing that, and that is the lunar current, also known as the left-hand path. So a lot of times, especially when you see on YouTube, these practitioners talk about, I'm a left-hand path practitioner, whatever. I think it's a little bit absurd to classify yourself as one or the other, because as we can see from this diagram, these two currents are really interlinked with each other, and the cycle is one. It's not two separate energies. It's one energy being expressed two different ways. So when we really talk about an overarching concept like human perspective being tied to this concept, we can really tangle with how we look at things in the outside world, or the inside world actually, because we are dealing with both of these energies. So if we're talking about the solar energy that represents things manifest in the material world, we're talking about relating things that happen in life back to us. We're talking about us reacting rather to the outside circumstance rather than us trying to project things on the outside circumstance. So you're in a more mindful state where your focus is really driven by the events that go on around you and how to extract wisdom and knowledge from that circumstance. So it's almost the surrendering of the individual self to connect with the natural flow of reality and what occurs in terms of physical events around you. And on the other hand, you have the lunar current, or the left-hand path, which is really associated with the night and darkness, and normally this concept kind of gets a bad rap, but understanding that they both just represent dualistic aspects of nature is kind of fundamental to really understanding it in its true being. So in this case, we really see the surrendering of the natural flow of reality to connect with the individual self and go through processes of cycles and change and rebirth and awakening. And that can only take place when you realize that something fundamental within you must go. And the reason why this occurs in this nature is because things moving in a cycle will have periods where parts are missing or there's some change going on. And that's why usually the moon, it goes through these cycles where, new moon, waxing, waning, full moon, whatever, is representing the change of these cycles and the process of change within ourselves in terms of reinventing ourselves, developing new ways of thinking about the world. And when we have the sun, we're really reminded of the concept that is tying it back to being in the present, in which we are continuing that change, but recognizing that we are still here, we are still on Earth, we're not going anywhere else to do this change. It's happening instantaneously within us. And we are always connected to that almost source energy, which is constantly flowing. So that energy is not really in change, and it really represents a fixed part of reality in which we move through the world and we are kind of in alignment with this deeper aspect of ourselves that is provided with this unlimited source really of energy. We talked about in previous episodes how, sunlight can help express over 300 genes in the body. We're talking about how it can have anti effects of of basically gene expression and removal of things that are toxins and poisons in the body to purify it and rejuvenate it back to its full extent, right? DNA repair, all these cellular functions that are associated with the sun and with the rejuvenation. The moon represents the releasing of the energies which are no longer needed. But both are imperative to continue the cycle of life. So one can't be forsaken for the other if one is a true practitioner of seeking their spiritual development or personal development overall. And the funny thing about this concept, and the reason why I wanted to talk about it today, is because we constantly interact with these energies every day in our lives. We're just not very conscious of it, and by not being conscious of it, we can only really express and draw out our personal growth to a certain extent because we're not putting a full intention behind that practice. So this really is imperative for the actualization of the self and self-expression overall. And to bring out your full potential to its fullest degree isn't something that is very straightforward, even when understanding all these concepts. But utilizing the tools at your disposal, again, is helpful when we talk about how we can change our lives or change our perspective on something or change our perspective of reality, or what they call in spirituality is shifting realities. This is imperative to understand because the moon and sun represent the cycle of life and death, the cycle of waking and sleep for a reason. It's because they're part of the same cycle. And during this cycle and during this process in which energy is in movement, there's different phases which energy goes through to release and bring stuff that is coming to fruition. So the psychology of the mind is really kind of deeply ingrained into these concepts, and the evolution of consciousness is changed throughout the epochs through these cycles over time. And right now we're in a age where things are a lot more sped up. We don't really sometimes know how to take a breath and just relax and connect with the simple nature of stuff around us, and overall just kind of take a moment to gather ourselves and realign ourselves with the simplistic nature of things. Things get so overcomplicated with, I have to do so many tasks in the day, and my energy's here, my energy's there. But when you're able to kind of retether yourself to these concepts that are ingrained within us in terms of understanding energy that is directly focused and energy that is indirectly focused, you can kind of figure out how that mechanical expression kind of comes to fruition again, how the cycle kind of repeats, how you're able to let things go, how you're able to bring new things to fruition and growth out. In terms of how to unlock this, it really comes down to, doing things like expressing yourself through maybe writing, or expressing yourself through deep introspective reflection. Things we constantly talk about on the show here, meditation, and the importance of understanding the inner self and why that really helps benefit the rest of your life and the aspects that are associated with it. And the effects of implementing these are pretty great, because when we talk about this concept of renewing or renewal, we're talking about releasing karma. We're talking about releasing things that are within us that no longer serve us. And sometimes we can get stuck into patterns of hanging on to stuff we don't need, especially emotions like resentment, anger, hatred, guilt, greed, uh, self-loathing, shame. That's a big one from the Garden of Eden, actually. And we've talked about that on a previous episode as well. And human beings can kind of learn about this growth process through their unconscious connection on both a physiological level and a spiritual level with these planetary spheres. And as we see, they're both connected to the same energy, just really expressed through different ways. And when we talk about how to understand this relative to us, I'm trying to come up with an example here, actually. Almost think about it as, say you're somebody who gets massage therapy, right? That could be represented through maybe this lunar aspect where you go maybe once a month and you release the tension that's in your body, and that's something that you do to help rejuvenate yourself and have a recovery period in your growth physically. Maybe the sun aspect might represent maybe going to the gym, which is something you do every day or more frequent. It's something that is constantly there, or a lifestyle in general, diet, things like that, if you stick to a strict regiment with that. So we can see how one thing occurs constantly and one thing occurs in kind of a cyclical pattern where it doesn't occur maybe every week, but it occurs maybe every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, whatever it is. And through that process, you're able to renew yourself and start again almost. And that doesn't mean that all your growth factor is gone or that the cycle restarts completely. It means that that carries over to the new cycle, and what is unneeded and what you must let go of is able to be released because you have consciously gone through this process of letting stuff go. So that's maybe an example of the different paths, right? And if you utilize one that is supposed to be used in one aspect too, either frequently or infrequently, such as going to the gym once a month, that's not going to help you as much as if you went consistently, right? And having massage therapy every day might not help you as much as if you did it once in a while. So we can really see that dualistic nature of reality, where the perspective that we have on these things and their level of effect in our life really impacts the cycle overall and the aspect of personal development. So if you can kind of categorize things into these two categories of things that occur regularly and things that occur not regularly or infrequently, then you can kind of better categorize things in your mental space and use that for transformation and growth. And again, these are not like very elementary concepts we're dealing with here. They're fundamental, but they're not elementary. And what I mean by that is that even though they're something that is deeply ingrained in us, that makes them all that more complicated to understand because they affect so many different aspects of life. So when we talk about how this affects spirituality and magic and, what they term in a cult as the left and right hand path, where sometimes they refer to it as, like white magic is like working with angels and like prayer and, reciting things that are maybe mantras or creeds that are associated with certain religious figures or certain religious entities or spiritual entities. And on the left-hand path might be the same thing, but maybe ones that are more associated with the darker aspects, more associated with lunar cycles of rebirth. So understanding that things like, angels and demons and spirits and whatever, they're all connected to the same kind of spectrum. It's just where on the spectrum they are, right? And understanding that these energies just represent different aspects of the internal self is imperative, because when you understand that, it demystifies them and destigmatizes them so that you can really interact with them in their fullest nature. Because if you think that, angels, like, walk around with halos on their head and they're like fluffy bunnies, and, they just essentially are supposed to be purely benevolent beings that just fix everything, and that's not really seeing them in their true angelic light. But if you see them as beings that are there to give you guidance and there to help you on your path and there to represent primordial aspects of creation and light, then you can really understand them as beings that are part of creation and part of the self and here to help you. And they are deeply ingrained aspects of the self, in the sense that they are part of all of us, and what they are meant to represent is aspects of the self. So for example, for Archangel Michael, somebody represented with battle, associated with the ability to beat back forces that disturb the natural flow of alignment and harmony. You can interpret this almost as, big warrior archangel with his sword, but it also represents more than that. It represents something that is the ability of the self to actualize to its fullest degree here on earth. It's representing an aspect to utilize your will to its fullest extent. It's utilizing a aspect of yourself that is seeking to transform life and beat back forces like shame, like guilt, things that hold you back in your physical body almost. Because you can, if you feel guilty about something or you feel shame of any kind, you can feel that internally. Your body understands these things. This is why people who often don't deal with emotional trauma and problems, they get like health diseases and sickness and whatever, because all that energy is pent up inside them and they've not dealt with it, right? But if you're seeking to transform that or move past that or overcome that and overwhelm that energy, then you're seeking to relieve something so something else can come. There's this saying that for something new to come, something old must go. And what that really means, in the sense of, almost if you want to relate this back to science, you could think of it as energy is neither created or destroyed. It's always transferred into different forms, and that's a law of thermodynamics. So when we talk about concepts like that, where things are transformed, think of it as you have a cup and you're putting water in the cup, you're pouring water in the cup, and then say you're drinking the water, and then the water gets low in the cup, and maybe you see some particles at the bottom of the cup, and you think, well, I want more water, but, I'd rather have fresh water. So you spill out the old water and you refill the cup, but the cup is still the same size. You put the same amount of water in there. It's just some water has left and some water has come, but the cup is still the same size. So that's really representing what is going on here. Energy is always moving through different cycles in which it's condensed and decondensed. When we talk about these two energies, they're often associated with things like density, where one aspect is representing the really dense aspect of the spectrum and the other is representing the not dense part of the spectrum. And the thing that ties them together is the electromagnetic force, in terms of, if you want to say science, right? Or in spirituality, they would refer to it as the auric field, right? So the magnetic field is really the breakdown of spiritual energy. And if you want to look more into that, I encourage you to actually go and look into the works of Manly P. Hall, who has kind of discussed some of the spiritual effects around the different bodies and such. But we're really talking about these concepts and how they integrate into transformation, right? Every time it might be something as simple as every time you use a bathroom, you're utilizing these processes of cycling energy throughout the body, right? You eat food for a reason. Your body is absorbing nutrients, but it's also releasing that which it doesn't need, because not everything you eat or consume or put into your body is necessary for it to have. And if you can program your body or program your magnetic field, if you want to use this scientific term again, to interpret the things that it does need as, okay, well, I'm an athlete, so I'm seeking to get my body stronger, or I'm seeking to build a more durable physique, then it's going to absorb the nutrients that are associated with that and produce chemicals in the brain that tell it that you need to do this, right? But if it doesn't have that directive, then it doesn't really matter, right? Because the body's going to do whatever. It's going to operate on the subconscious programming. And that programming that you get, typically, if you don't program it yourself, comes from, as we talked about, first 7 years of life before, subconscious programming you get from your parents, from the environment, from people who are around you at that age, any trauma or circumstances that you have encountered earlier in life. You're going to absorb all of that, and that is going to become what your aura is reflecting, right? So if you want to change that, you really need to program the directive in your brain to say, okay, well, I want to only program it with the things that are in alignment with what I want, not with, what other people tell me I want, or what other people try to force on me or get me to believe, right? So you need to have a way to filter out the ideals of the environment so they only associate with what benefits you. Because if you don't do that, then you're constantly walking around absorbing things. And, we talked about this before, actually, in the last version of this episode. It didn't get recorded, but the point that I was making was that your brain is almost like a disk drive, right? It's like a hard drive, and if you don't clean it up, if you don't run the disk cleanup software, then it gets cluttered and it gets backed up with a whole bunch of stuff it doesn't need. So you got to throw stuff in the recycling bin sometimes and empty the bin, right? And really free up space on the hard drive, because if not, you're carrying all these files around with you that is like, maybe it's even things that are impeding your self-talk. Maybe it's, you're not good enough, you don't deserve, you're not gonna make it. There's all these things are sometimes deeply ingrained into us, because if you were the child who was told you do not deserve, then this is neuroscience now that shows that 95 to 99% of your life you will sabotage yourself to ensure that you do not deserve. So to really overcome that, you can't do it with this 1 to 5% processor, which is going against this 95 to 99% processor, because it's not going to work, right? You're competing against a much more powerful processor, really. And in a lot of ways, the brain is really like a computer system, not in it entirely, but in some ways you can compare it to that, especially when we talk about the right hand path specifically, where you're really plugged in and things are fixed and energy is always there. It's almost like a switch, right? Like they have information now, actually, in neuroscience that proves that things like meditation can influence gene expression, and it can influence the expression of the DNA through unwinding and winding these spindles around it. So if you're somebody who has diabetes in your family, and you have a switch that is innately on in your genetics to ensure that that is expressed in your genome, you can do meditation, or you can focus your mind to actually tell your brain that it doesn't need that, and it will turn the switch off. So it will change the genome expression, it'll change your gene expression to actually fit that which is beneficial to you. So, you should take advantage of the things that we have very mundanely actually in life. One of the benefits of this world, in fact, in living in a society, because a lot of times society does not actually help us interact with our spirituality, but one of the ways it can be utilized to do it is actually through the use of language, because language seems very mundane to us. People in North America commonly speak English, so that is something that we really understand. We're able to interpret the meaning of words fairly easily, especially if it's your first language. It's deeply ingrained into your psychology. So if you say strong enough times to yourself, you're going to be strong, because you've imprinted that on your mind, especially if you're in a relaxed state where your body is in a receptive state to understand this kind of principle. It's going to be able to absorb it. It's cause and effect right here. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's alignment rather. If you are aligned with something you want to hear and you hear it on repeat, it's almost like a good song. You hear a good song enough times, you remember the lyrics and you remember the beat and you remember the rhythm. So it's the same thing with the human mind. And through that, you can really influence all these things that affect your body. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. That's where actually, for me personally, to relay something about myself, this is how I started off in spirituality, learning about psychology and learning about biology and physiology and basically the chemistry that goes on within us, neuroscience, and even principles of physics relate to it. But as you reform the aspects of the self through doing meditation, through doing mindfulness, and through practicing listening consciously to what you want, you can really expand that through your auric field, as you want to say, to after you have deduced things internally, you can then move that energy outwards. So, say I want to be more active, I want to be in shape, I want to be whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay, then you're going to form a belief pattern that aligns with you going to the gym, or it aligns with you doing exercise, or it aligns with you doing some kind of self-beneficial thing, because you have programmed it in there. You programmed your mind to understand that, okay, this is something that is important to me, this is something that I need to do. So maybe not all the times it will get done, but a large portion of the time it will get done, because you have programmed it in there. So it's almost like a computer that you install a game on. Like, say you install say you install Pac-Man on your computer, right? And you don't have any other games on there. You can only play Pac-Man, right? So the computer system is already associated with how to run that program or how to run that game. So it's the same thing with understanding your directive when you're trying to program it to do something you want. So you have to override the software essentially that has been there and install the one you want. So in this case, it really comes down to, can I get the software that is inside of me to produce the result I want? And can I make sure that not just the software but the hardware is also aligned with that directive? And there's other ways you can do that besides just meditation and whatnot. There's sometimes there's supplements you can take which help you spiritually develop in terms of benefiting the physical body, so then the spiritual body can benefit as a result of that. So if you say you're trying to make your directive, I want to be more active, so maybe you take iron because your hemoglobin is low, so then you have more hemoglobin in your blood to do more reps in the gym. and therefore that translates into more willpower behind the thing that you want to do or the directive that you want to accomplish. That is approaching something from the opposite energy. Instead of approaching it from the lunar aspect of meditation and introspection and programming things internally, you've approached it from the solar aspect of, okay, well, I can take a supplement to assist me in doing this thing. It's not the directive, and it's not the programming of the directive. It's something assisting that. So those, again, these two energies coming together is what creates that middle energy. So I think that has been a good analogy to kind of explain really the dynamic in which these two associate with each other. And when we talk about things associated with consciousness and with personal growth and with what have you, we're talking about energy that is now coming into the aspect of being and manifest in your life in all these different ways. Again, this is not two separate energies, they're just two ends of a spectrum, right? So even if you want to talk about things good and bad or light and dark or up and down, they're only relative to each other. If you don't know up, you can't know what down is. If you don't know good, you don't know what bad is, right? And sometimes when people talk about religion and like consciousness and God, they say, well, if God exists, why would he allow evil into the world, or why would he allow bad things to happen? Well, maybe God didn't allow evil, but maybe he allowed the possibility of evil, which is different, right? Because to not have that contrast, to see something different from you, is not truly free will. So if we're talking about really understanding perspective on things and understanding that which you want to see manifest or understand or seek to understand or seek to interact with on some level, rather, because there's a whole bunch of different layers and levels in which one can interact with certain things, right? So if you want to interact with something, you must interact with the possibility of that thing first, right? It's almost like when people talk about manifestation, you must be able to visualize the thing that you want before you can manifest it, right? So it's the same thing with anything. If you want to utilize that genome expression that we talked about earlier, the expression of the genome, so you can, build bigger muscles in the gym, for example, if that is your goal, then you can program the genome expression to do that. And it will do that because you have programmed it enough times to say, okay, well, I'll visualize the concept that I want. I'll tell myself things that are associated with that which I want. I am strong, whatever. And then I'll do things like take supplements, or maybe you don't take a supplement. Maybe you, maybe you don't need one. Maybe you have a post-workout shake or something like that, and that's your mental kind of programming to yourself in terms of something physical. That's the thing that is going to assist you in terms of recognizing a regiment in the material world. And the gym and getting bigger is the middle path in which represents what the change is. So we've covered quite a bit today, and I might just wrap it up there, really, because to be honest, this is kind of a big topic. So utilizing analogies to kind of emphasize that which you want to explain is kind of the best option here, because when we talk about philosophical aspects like light and dark, we're really contemplating the nature of the cosmos and of reality, which is a lot to digest in just 40 minutes we're at now, right? So I think we'll wrap it up there for today, because really we've covered quite a bit. We covered magic, we covered left and right hand path, we covered consciousness, we covered genome expression, we covered magnetic and auric field of the body, which occurs through the middle polarity. And we've covered really how to bring out self-expression to the fullest amount, right? It might have been in an analogy with, how to develop yourself in terms of exercise or whatever, but still it's related to the same concept. And if you can really deduce what that is, deduce the truth that I'm telling you, because again, truth is based around perspective, right? Truth is based around perspective, and if you understand that everyone's truth is different, but try to understand everybody else's truth or understand the truths you come into contact with, then you can reformulate that which you believe. So when I impart this information saying that, if you do this, this, and this, and this can benefit, your genome expression, your goals around gym, and, the lifestyle assisting that can also help, then you can find a way to implement that into your own lifestyle if you choose so. So that's the end of the show today. So this has been Moonstruck right here on Riot Radio. Remember to like, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section what you would like to see. And you can follow me on Instagram at top_sorcerer if you so choose. And we will pick this up next week, talking about a CIA document. Once again, I'm calling this segment CIA Story Time, and we're going to discuss another deep document in which we uncover the mysteries of consciousness. So take care, and thanks for watching.